Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. Lauren, I was all ready to talk about NC State's incredible third quarter up at Boston College. I was ready to talk about North Carolina's almost disaster at Keenan yesterday against Miami. But Pitt beat Virginia Tech, and this has created some interesting conversations. We're going to spend a little bit of time on Pitt beating Virginia Tech. And it started a little bit of conversation. I know Dan Wolken of USA Today floated out the idea that quarterback Kenny Pickett might be a Heisman hopeful. Like, why not, given the way that he's playing and the way Pitt is playing right now? But it also gave us this from Brett Michaels.
Yeah, like what? Is there a connection there or something?
I don't know. I really don't know.
And also, like, why that picture?
I don't know. I feel like, look, our friend Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic is probably too busy trying to interview the person who threw a full mustard bottle at last night's Tennessee Ole Miss game. But I do need Nicole Auerbach to interview Brett Michaels about this particular tweet and whether or not it's like, does this bless your timeline now, Pitt? Is like,
you know what I think too? This makes me feel like there were not enough people on Twitter during the Music City Bowl.
Maybe not.
I mean, I dodged ketchup bottles.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that.
Tennessee fans were there too, man. And they threw, I was like, wow, a full ketchup bottle. That could have been lethal. Whatever.
Yeah. No
like a glass one.
So let's talk about NC State beating Boston College yesterday. It was a slog of a first half, but there are some nights where you feel like everything is going your way, right? Or some days you're having a good day. The coffee hits a little bit different. You get every green light on your way to work. Your evening is fantastic. Your kids behave, all that kind of stuff. I feel like that was NC State's trip to Boston College. I'm not trying to say they didn't do the work. I'm not trying to say the coaching staff didn't, have a game plan. I'm just saying there were some things that you go, man, everything that could go right for you did, whether it was like magic catches for that first touchdown, BC's punter literally dropping the ball so that Devin Boykin can take that in. Tipped ball interception that ends up in a touchdown. And then there was the Thayer Thomas touchdown, which was, I believe, a broken play. And Devin Leary threw a great ball, but like Thayer Thomas just happened to be in the right place right there. Right. Boom, touchdown. Like everything that could go right for State broke open in the third quarter. And look, Dave Doran said this after they beat Clemson. And this was in the Wolfpack One coaches show. That's kind of like a Hard Knocks thing. It was a really candid moment from Doran, which I loved seeing. And that was, he tells the team, we're the best blanking team in this league. And this trip to Boston College was kind of like a prove-it game for that. On the road, for sure. I don't care. In the weird year that we are in this league, going on the road counts for something. And I thought that was an impressive win for NC State, and they go to Miami next.
Yeah, and also, like, it's worth keeping in mind that when Boston College fans show up, it's usually for a game like that. And they had a pretty decent crowd. At noon on a Saturday might have been a little bit different of an environment there. But
I'm glad you brought that up. Like, Gilio had this, like there's this conversation about State going to BC if it's like a house of horrors. Well, it depends. If it's a noon game, doesn't work out for State. Evening games in the environment.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And I mean, the thing is, State was the better team this year. There have been years where I think we have looked at State as the better team, but I don't know that was discernibly true. But I think Boston College without Phil Dracovic, like, State's the better football team. So,
yes.
And maybe even with him, they would have been the better team. But regardless, they were definitely the better team without Dracovic. And so, they went up there and they showed that, and that's good. I mean, you don't always see that, and that's a good thing. Even when State has been better, it hasn't been measurably enough that you would see it kind of show itself during the game necessarily. And they did what they needed. They took care of business. They did what they were supposed to do, which Lord knows during this college football season is such a prized commodity because it's not happening every week.
As the kids would say, the Wolfpack understood the assignment.
Yes.
And they went up there and they did it. And I referenced Boykin. Boykin did more than just that score. He had a great game. I mean, he broke up a pass in the end zone. He was all over the place. He was probably NC State's best player
Well, I mean,
in that game.
yeah, like he literally he prevented 7. He was the only thing in line there to prevent the 7, and then he scored 7. So that's a pretty good day if you're a defensive player to have a direct impact on 2 touchdowns.
That's a pretty damn good night. Now, NC State goes to Miami next, another road game. It's going to be you want to talk about sleepy. I believe it's an evening game down at Joe Robbie Stadium. My dad is actually going to this game.
Why?
And my dad might be the only one there, given the fact that Miami
fans will show up to be mad at Manny.
Maybe because Miami's off to their worst start since 1997 after a heartbreaking loss in Chapel Hill. I thought that North Carolina had done an effective job of sweeping the leg on the Hurricanes. I mean, at halftime, I was even tweeting out about like, all right, who's after Manny Diaz? And there's a larger conversation to have about Coastal coaching here in a little bit, which we can have later, but let's focus on this game first. Miami's a broken team. Without De'Aaron King and a handful of other injuries, it's not like Miami doesn't have talent, but they just, my feelings on this. I don't view them as a well-coached team, and Manny Diaz is the reason why for that. And I'm just wondering how much longer they're going to put up with Manny Diaz.
I guess, but at the same time, they got to find a better backup plan because this has been them to some degree since the Larry Coker era. Like,
I agree, and I have a suggestion for Miami, which we'll get to later. But the issue that I had on Saturday was North Carolina continues to just make things unnecessarily difficult on themselves. They can't clean up their own mistakes. I actually was kind of commending North Carolina for the first half play. Yeah, there was the pick 6, there was a missed field goal, but for the most part, I thought North Carolina did what they were supposed to do. And then the second half comes around, and they just can't, taking penalties, missed defensive assignments. It was just another one of these sloppy games for North Carolina, and they opened the door for Miami to come through, and it was almost pulled off. I know Mac Brown mentioned it after the game, but I had the same kind of similar thought to 2019 Duke, where you were about to have one of the most gut-wrenching losses in that building, and people were going to be super mad, but now you're focused on the miraculous interception at the end that saves the day. There are plenty of things still wrong with this North Carolina team. It's the same game over and over and over again, and we're midway through the season.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that I have advocated for this being a better defensive team. I still think the talent is better, but you cannot let that Miami team do what it did. It's one thing to let an FSU team with a mobile quarterback, and that's always tricky for them and everybody.
Sure.
No, I don't understand what they're trying to do. And it's a weird thing to say, right? To say that, like, to criticize Phil Longo, considering they put up 45 points and they have the number in yards per play in the country, even with losing what they just lost, they're 12th, right? Like, what's to say bad? Except for we all saw, like, on the sideline towards the end, we even saw Mac Brown talking to Phil Longo, like, man, what you doing there?
What are we doing here?
Like, they went pretty conservative there, and because it's one thing to go conservative and use a bunch of clock, but it's another thing to do that and not use the clock like you should. And you saw Max sort of point up at the clock and look at Longo, and Longo was kind of like because it didn't use much clock, and then you also don't let you run it twice, and you don't put the ball in Sam Howell's hands. Like, a lot of
and that's the other thing too. Sam Howell has. This was a game in which Sam Howell, and shout out to Adam Smith, who I know asked the question to Mac Brown after the game, like, what was it? What did he say? Like, was that Sam Howell or Michael Carter?
Javonte Williams on this.
Or Javonte Williams, right? So shout out to Adam Smith for that question. It's a brilliant way of putting it. But that was kind of the MO for that night. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's like, why wouldn't you keep with Sam Howell, considering that Miami can't tackle him? They want to bounce him, but they cannot tackle him. There was one of those touchdowns where it was incredibly bad execution on Miami's defense. Why would you not take advantage of that? So it's a very North Carolina's in a weird place right now for a variety of reasons, and they've got their off week before they go to Notre Dame. And I'll be really curious to see how Mac Brown talks about adjustments on the coaching staff and why they insist on kind of like square peg round hole this season.
Yeah, it's just been weird on all fronts. It's just been like something not quite right on almost every front, except really special teams, because special teams has been fine. Like special teams have been pretty good, and it was a disaster last year. So to go from fine to fine from a disaster is an improvement. But yeah.
No, what were you gonna say?
I think what it is too is like, I understand the comparison. I heard some of the players make the comparison to the Duke game. I don't know that that's where you want to be in a year that you're in the preseason top 10.
Right. That was year one. That was year one. You know?
Yes.
That's not what you're supposed to be doing against teams that you're clearly better than in terms of Miami.
And UNC fans did celebrate that win in spite of the fact that like they were the better team and maybe shouldn't have been in a game that close with Duke or whatever. Carolina fans were just happy to get that win at the time. I remember. But things are different now. And that should be a good thing that they're different now. And it feels like a little bit of fan gaslighting, to be honest with you.
Well, it's funny you bring that up.
Yeah, that quote felt like fan gaslighting to me.
Well, this is what Mac Brown's been doing the last 3 weeks. So after the game, Mac Brown says, "I don't mind people being critical because that's part of the reason they come." Well, of who was there on Saturday. I know there was a storm coming through, but it wasn't. So there's some element of yesterday. But if you're a North Carolina fan and you can't really be excited and celebrate tonight, you're probably not the fan you want to be. So now all of a sudden we're doing real fans. This is 3 weeks in a row now. So after the Duke win, there was the bandwagon's full. I hope there's no tickets for you. Why are you poking fans? And then after the loss after Florida State, it was, hey fans, stick with us. We're working through this and all this other stuff.
Well, that one I understood. You hear coaches say that all the time. Like that one, I didn't think. Yeah.
And then complaining about the media and it's maybe we should be critical of you because you had us in the top 10 and everything else. And then now we got this. It's just very strange to me that this is kind of happening right now. That's why shout out to Lee Quinn, who is usually in the mentions when it comes to North Carolina stuff, because he had tweeted this in response. If you're a North Carolina coach and you're excited and celebrating after that game, you're probably not the coach we want you to be, which is a pretty harsh way of putting it. And
I feel bad because like part of me is torn because look, I'm a player's first person, so are you, and I don't want people to be overly harsh and critical of the players. So I do agree that they should be allowed to enjoy the win and that you should feel happy for them considering what they've been through. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. We are on the same page there. And I think if North Carolina fans, there are plenty that do feel that way. But I think that if you're asking them to be like more excited than they are relieved for those players, like I think you're asking a lot considering the whole context of the season. And it's just like, if you're going to build a football culture at North Carolina, in my opinion, the way to go about it isn't to ask people to be happy about a win like that one, considering the whole context of the season. Like people that have football cultures wouldn't be excited about that.
No, you're a bad decision from Tyler Van Dyke and a fluky tip drill away from having lost that game. That was the margin. That was the margin for North Carolina and Miami. And I just feel, this is my theory. You tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. I feel like Mac Brown's doing a poor Roy Williams imitation when it comes to taking the focus off the team, and maybe a disappointing year, and focusing it on the coach. Like, let's absorb the problem. Like, let's absorb the criticism. Roy Williams does it in a very folksy way. And Mac is doing it in a very kind of salty way.
And I was going to say too, like, it's also that like Roy obviously had, cachet when he would do that.
Yeah.
Like, so, but you can't.
The national championship didn't happen at North Carolina. It happened with Vince Young at Texas.
So. I remember when Mac left and for the first time. And I remember when there was this implication out there that somehow Carolina fans were never going to be good enough. And that was part of the reason that he would go, because the football culture wasn't ever going to be past a certain point. Right. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
That
You're
was
right.
sort of the implication that was always, they were always going to care more about basketball, and that's what it is. So I don't, I guess like I just don't understand the notion of like,
Clearly,
which do you want? Do you want them to be the football fever fans that are crazy about football and that get mad at you for, almost losing what would have been a disappointing game at home for the second straight home loss, considering the whole context of the season? Or
mm-hmm.
do you want them to just be, I don't know, what is it that you want them to be, I guess, that's what I'm unclear on.
I don't know if I'm right about this, but my theory is Mac Brown came back to North Carolina thinking it was going to be one big happy, like, I'm back, isn't it great? And it's going to be good, happy, nostalgic feelings the entire time, not
He
understanding.
wanted everybody to just be thankful, which I get.
Exactly, to be
agree,
thankful that
but
he came back and he's going to repair North Carolina and things like that. But that's not how it is now. Times have changed. It's not 1997 anymore. Speaking of coaching, coastal stuff here. I feel like we're on track for at least 3 changes in the coastal and definitely 1 in the Atlantic.
Definitely 1 in the coastal for sure.
So David Cutcliffe and Duke are at a point where a hard decision is going to have to be made. I mean, they got embarrassed at Virginia on Saturday. And I have a feeling that Cutcliffe is going to be able to retire after this year. I mean, you don't want to go out like that, but I can't imagine with a new AD and everything else and kind of like where things have gone under this program, that Cutcliffe comes back for another year. It's unfortunate because he's done a lot to kind of clearly, getting to the championship game and everything else, but Duke was nothing, a big nothing, but when Cut got there, and he actually helped establish some like expectations for the Blue Devils, and it might be time for them to go in a different direction. I got a feeling that Justin Fuente and things at Virginia Tech are going to evaporate. And obviously, my feelings on Manny Diaz at Miami. Obviously, there's some conversation about the buyout and whether or not what they can do going forward. And then, Dino Babers probably should have been fired on Friday night in their loss to Syracuse. In their
that
loss
was
to Clemson.
brutal.
Because when you play not to win, you deserve to lose, and that is a consistent thing with Dino Babers at Syracuse. That was an embarrassing way. That was an embarrassing way to end on Friday night.
I would not say it's playing not to lose for Dino. It's just bad decision making late in games. Whether it's playing, sometimes it's too risky, and sometimes it's too conservative.
Way too conservative on Friday night.
Was.
Way too conservative on Friday night. Way too conservative. So that's kind of, I think, where things are right now in the middle of October as it relates to coaching. You feeling that? Not feeling that?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right, to be honest. And then, who knows, maybe Wake will have to replace Dave Clawson. Maybe some SEC school or whoever will wake up and throw a bunch of money his way. Or maybe he won't want that. I mean, who knows? But that's what
I don't know what Dave Clawson wants. That's the thing.
I'm just saying,
like somebody had floated Pat Narduzzi too at Pitt. Like if they get to the championship game and all that stuff, right? Like how long does Narduzzi hang out at Pitt? I mean, there could always be a coach leaving for somewhere else. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of coaches where their time at that program is probably winding down.
Agreed.
Those would be the 4 coaches off the top of my head right now, based on what we've seen, where I can see the administrations deciding, it's probably time to go in a different direction.
Yeah, I think that's probably the list at that point. And Fuente to me is at the top of it because there was a conversation about buying him out even after last season.
Oh yeah, it was icy. Yeah, it's been icy up in Blacksburg.
I don't know what's wrong with that offense. 7 points against Pitt? What? How?
I don't know. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll see y'all later in the week.